Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me just make it absolutely clear to our audience that I'm not arguing that we're going back to feudalism. No, we're moving forward. What we're moving forward to is not very pleasant and it is highly problematic. But by all means, please, this is not an argument that we're going back to feudalism. In the same way that, when we talk about neoclassical economics, this has got nothing to do with classical economics, right? It's not a return to classical economics. If anything, it's a complete reversal of classical economics. Techno-feudalism is not a reversal. It is moving forward in a historical context, which is totally congruent with what you said, the way you described historical change. When society transformed itself from feudalism to capitalism, essentially what happened? Essentially, power that used to be derived from the land, from owning the land. If you owned the land, you were a landowner, you had power. You had political power, economic power, discursive power, ideological power, religious power, right? And how did your wealth accumulate? It accumulated in the form of a rent that you charged the people who actually worked the land, the peasants. But not only the peasants, also the ironsmiths and the artisans who were encased in your feudal fiefdom. With capitalism, power shifts from those who own land to those who own capital. And what's capital? It's not money. It is produced means of production. Tools, machinery, buildings, things that we create in order to create something else. That's what capital is, produced means of production. So powers shifted from the landowners. It's not that the landowners lost power. They didn't have any power. And today, if you own half of Amsterdam or half of London, you have a lot of power. But it's not what moves the system. What moves the system is machinery. It's produced means of production capital. My point is that, and this is where I'm trying to, or getting to, answering your very precise question about cloud capital. My point is that capital was so successful at procuring on behalf of its owners power to extract, power to persuade, power to make people do what you want them to do just because you own so much capital. It became so successful. It totally sidelined trades unions and parliaments and, all the things that we associate with a civilized society. And it triumphed completely. So much so, and this is my argument, that it mutated to a new form of capital, a mutation of capital, which is capital, of course, machinery. But it is very different to all sorts of capital we had. So anything from a hammer to a plow, to a tractor, to a diesel engine, to an industrial robot of this era that was very snazzy, all singing, all dancing. All these things are produced means of production. But what lives in, I don't have my phone here to show you, in our smartphone, in our iPads, in tablets and so on. And of course, all the machinery that connects them and networks them together. The cables, the algorithms, the server farms, and so on. This is machinery. If you go into a server farm, it sounds like a factory. So it's capital. But it is not productive. It doesn't produce anything per se. What it does is it creates an interface between us and the machinery, whereby we train the machine to know us well enough to give us suggestions, like Amazon suggests books to you, which usually are good suggestions, right? So it gains your trust. So next time it proposes that you buy this electric bicycle rather than that one, you think, okay, sure. And you buy it, and it's usually congruent with your desires. And at that moment, you have replaced advertisers, marketers by machines that are dialectical. You train them to train you, to train them to train you. And once they start inputting desires into your bosom, into your heart, into your mind, whatever it is, then it bypasses markets. You click on a button and you buy that electric bicycle, and not from a market, but from a platform, which in my mind looks very much like a modern fiefdom. It's not comprising of land. but it is comprising of digital land. So Amazon.com is a fiefdom belonging to one man, Jeff Bezos, that he owns this digital fiefdom, cloud fiefdom I call it, and he doesn't produce anything, like the landlords of yesterday didn't produce anything. He's a capitalist. He owns a lot of capital, but that capital doesn't produce anything except the power of Jeff Bezos to bypass the market and to charge for the electric bicycle that you purchased 40% of the price. And that's a form of rent. It's not ground rent, it's cloud rent. So my point is, briefly, just to sum up, that we have moved forward into a hyper-capitalist world, a hyper-capital world, cloud capital, which is not productive, but which has created a transformation from the owners of produced means of production to the owners of cloud capital that doesn't produce anything other than power to extract rents, cloud rents, from both workers, not both, from workers, from non-workers. Every time you post something on YouTube and so on, you add to the cloud capital of Google, and from traditional capitalists who sell their stuff, they have to sell their stuff on these cloud thieves, and they lose 30-40% of the value, in the same way that app creators lose 30% to Apple. So a society that is increasingly dominated by capital, so you can call it hyper-capitalist if you want, nevertheless, doesn't have the main ingredients of capitalism. Which are the two main ingredients of capitalism? Markets and profit. Markets had replaced the thieves, and profits had replaced the rents. Now we have these platforms that are cloud thieves, and profits are being siphoned off in the form of cloud rents. And what I then say is that, we haven't gone back to feudalism, but we've gone forward to something which I call techno-feudalism, which is hyper-capitalist in terms of the role of machines in our lives, but they're not productive machines. They are machines that produce exorbitant power, and a new ruling class, the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezos, and so on, who rule above the traditional capitalists, the working class, and the precariat, who are increasingly cloud served, because we all work for the algorithm. I was astounded when I was researching this book of mine, Techno-Feudalism, that the total amount of money, or the percentage of revenues of Facebook, of Meta, let's say, that go to salaries is 1%. 1%. 99% does not go to salaries of people working there. From 85 to 1 is a huge gap, right? And so, as we say on the left, on the Hegelian left in particular, quantity leads to quality. Quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. So, and the question is, how do they get away with that? Why is it that they have such a fantastic rent ratio? I would call it profit ratio. I would call it a rent ratio. Well, the reason is because if you look at Facebook, most of the investment that goes into the capital of Facebook is the result of free labor. When people upload their stories, their photos, this is what adds to the cloud capital of Facebook. Why do people get engulfed in Facebook? Why can't you leave Facebook easily? Well, because your friends are in there, and your own texts are in there, and the texts of your friends and your photographs and the videos of your friends are in there. So when, for instance, Elon Musk bought Twitter, lots of us wanted to leave Twitter, for obvious reasons, and don't need to explain that, right? But, I have 1.2 million followers in Twitter. If I leave, and I did go to Blue Sky, but there I have, 10 people initially, right? So the switching costs are so large that these platforms, these thieves, operate like thieves with walls around them. They are not real walls, they are virtual walls. They're the walls from network effects and switching costs and so on. But in the end, those walls allow the owners of these places to charge huge rents, cloud rents, and to keep building those walls higher and higher, not with their own investment. They do invest, of course. They have new servers, new optic fiber cables and so on. But the main investment is by all of us who are tweeting, posting, and doing all that, which are making it even harder for us to get out of them. And the harder it is for us to get out of them, the easier it is for the owner to charge cloud rents. Too true. Look, economies of scope have always existed. You had large corporations with huge economies of scope, not just scale, that did a lot of things at once, especially in the financial sector. And look at private equity and so on. That's not specific to cloud capital. What cloud capital does, it turbocharges this. Absolute turbocharges. And at such a level that it's not just a quantitative, but it is a qualitative increase. So take, for instance, you mentioned transportation, right? Well, what's Uber? What's Deliveroo? They are transportation companies that own no cars, no motorcycles, and no trucks. What they own is the algorithm, the cloud capital, which allows you to train the cloud capital to know you so that it captures you inside Uber, inside Deliveroo, both as a driver and as a consumer. And in the case of Deliveroo, also as a restaurant that sends food out, parcels. And in the end, you've got a situation where this cloud capital and the capacity to generate rents increasingly takes over from the actual standard economic activities. So let me give you an example. Uber increasingly makes its money not from exploiting taxi drivers and consumers, but from the data of consumers, from the data of riders on Uber, and the data from the drivers. Take Tesla. But increasingly, Chinese electric car manufacturers, more and more, a higher and higher percentage of their revenue now, in the case of Tesla, comes not from selling you a car or its spare parts, but it comes from the fact that as you're driving your Tesla and you're going to your mother-in-law or your father-in-law or your children or whoever, it knows whom you're visiting, at what time, what music you've been listening to, while you were visiting your mother-in-law as opposed to your daughter, which supermarket did you stop at to pick something up, what was that? All this information, which is highly correlated with who you are and what are your propensities to spend on X, Y, and Z, this information is then sold on. And Tesla makes a lot more money. So that's why Volkswagen is kaput, because Volkswagen doesn't have cloud capital. So cloud capital, for me, the reason why I keep insisting that it is an important concept, without which you can't really understand the manner in which the process that you described is unfolding. That's why. So going to your question about the political right and the political left, look, what is clear to me is that the center is gone. The center has not held. The center cannot hold. The capacity of multinational corporations to dodge tax, not to pay tax, to do a lot of harm to our environment, to waste our resources, to pollute and so on. That's a long story. It's good. From the beginning of the 20th century, we should really be worried about that exorbitant power of monopoly capital and multinational monopoly capital to do that. And those of us on the left, we always were worried about that. But some people on the liberal side of politics as well. So this is not new. What is new is the cloud capital. And let me give you an example, right? Take, for instance, General Motors or Volkswagen or any large corporation, Rolls-Royce, BASF, and Bethlehem Steel. All of those traditional monopoly capitalist firms, about 80-85% of their revenues went to wages and salaries, from lowly wages all the way up to CEOs and CFOs and all that. Thank you for the question. It's a brilliant one. What cloud capital does, it eliminates the liberal individual and poisons democracy. I'll start from the first. Liberals defended capitalism traditionally on the basis that, firstly, the market works beautifully, or as well as any mechanism that humanity can devise, to send signals to producers, to consumers, and so on. A signal emitting device which helps us coordinate. The invisible hand of Adam Smith. That was the first part of the liberal defense of capitalism. And the second part was that, if you are a worker, a waged laborer, you sell your labor for 8 hours a day, but then the rest of your time is yours. It's your leisure time. You can do things with it. You can educate yourself. You can play. You can go to the theater. You can watch TV, whatever. Yeah, it's your time. So there's a time when you are in the marketplace, the labor market, when you are with your employer, and then it's yours. Then it is, you are an autonomous sovereign agent, the liberal individual. Well, both those arguments about the invisible hand of the market and the liberal individual, well, cloud capital has wrecked both of them. Firstly, because there are no markets anymore. We have fiefdoms. So yes, there is rivalry between TikTok and Amazon and Instagram. There is rivalry, and TikTok did a lot of damage to Instagram. But that's not competition. Competition is when you say, you produce this mug and I produce an equivalent mug, and we try to beat each other in the marketplace on the basis of price and quality and image, whatever. But here, you don't have competition. You have rivalry between two different fiefdoms. If you're stuck in Amazon and you do most of your business as a business person, you're selling in Amazon, right? And then to recalibrate all your marketing and go to TikTok is a very big switching thing. You cannot do it on the basis of today I'm going to buy this, tomorrow I'm going to buy another cup or mug, right? This is gone. So the market, it's not prices that determine what you do. The price mechanism has died. Now there are other things like the extent to which you are exploited. How much money is Google asking you to pay it in order to publicize your wares on the Google search engine, right? So that's not prices. That's different levels of exploitation, which if they exceed a certain level, then you go to another exploiter, another platform, another fiefdom. That's not the market as Friedrich von Hayek, for instance, imagined it being, or Adam Smith, a signal emitting device. As for the liberal individual, look, I was alerted to this quite a few years ago, Glenn, when I was still a professor at the university, by students of mine who used to come to me and, seeking advice on what to do with themselves, their careers. They wanted reference letters and so on to find work or postgraduate programs and so on. And I noticed that they were very, very engulfed in an existentialist angst. Because you see, the moment you enter social media, I'm not against social media. I am into social media. This is not me being a purist saying, oh, it's terrible being social media. But what I'm doing is a realistic assessment of what it means, especially for a young person, to be in social media. And I watched this with my daughter and her friends and young people, students and so on. And I think this is a common experience. They know, these kids, that everything they tweet, all the posts they put on Snapchat, on Instagram, on TikTok and so on, they stay there. There's a record. And they know that when they seek a particular position with some company that they think highly of, that some AI bot is going to look at their history and come up with an idea, with a decision, are we going to interview these kids or not? So what does this mean? It means that, let's say it's 11 o'clock at night, you have a kid that is in bed and tweeting, they don't tweet, but they post and upload on Instagram and so on. They have this need to communicate with one another through this way, but at the back of their mind, they think, oh, you know what? I'm curating a personality that some employer is at some point, maybe in 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe in 20 years, is going to look at. So suddenly they are taken over by the angst. Should I post this? Is this a kind of person that somebody will want to hire in 10 years? They may not think of this consciously, but subconsciously they know that. So essentially what I'm saying is they're not free. At that point, they're not expressing themselves. They're constantly curating a personality like a brand which is for sale in 10 years from now. So that's the death of the liberal individual. If you add to that our newspapers, our television channels, our radio stations are all being taken over or being marginalized, pushed aside by Twitter, by, all the social media, which are now taking over news and current affairs and all that. And those are driven by cloud capital, which has been primed, optimized in terms of its coding to get us angry. Why? Because if we're angry, then we engage more with the screen. So the algorithm is not political, doesn't give a damn. It simply acts on behalf of its owner. The cloud capital acts on behalf of its owner to get us more engaged. And it works out of its own. It doesn't even need to read Freud or Jung or whoever. The algorithm works out that if it makes us pissed off, really very seriously angry, then we are going to engage more and cloud capitalism will be replenished more readily. So it poisons our conversations. It keeps showing us things that make us angry, whether they are from our own ideological perspective, reinforcing our biases, or showing us what the enemy, the satanic people on the other side of politics show, or tell, or say, and that totally annuls any possibility of a conversation. I'll start from the last part. America and Chinese. The United States and China are the two loci, the two places where cloud capital is concentrated. The rest of the world has very little. Europe has none. None. We have a lot of machines and we have digital networks and we have companies that try to startups and so on. But we don't have, even the ones we have, like Volt and Spotify, they've been taken over by the Americans. And then you have the Chinese, because the Chinese created the Chinese war. Effectively, they banned Google, they banned Meta, and they created their own. And it was very smart on their behalf to do this. So you've got America and you've got China. Very different big techs. It is very interesting how the Chinese authorities have reined in their big tech. Essentially, they have put a lead on how much cloud rents they should extract from the rest of the economy. They have pushed AI into productive purposes, not unlike the United States, which is all about the service sector. It's all about, writing prompts into ChatGPT. But in China, they are fusing AI with productive machines to produce stuff. In the United States, you don't do that. In Europe, we do nothing. And you can see that in the negotiations between the European Commission and Donald Trump's government on the trade deal. Because, the fact that the European Union has a massive trade surplus with the United States gives Trump so much power, bargaining power over Europe. Because if I have a huge trade surplus with you, then effectively I cannot win a tariff war against you. You can destroy me with tariffs if I have a huge trade surplus with you. And I remember during those conversations, people saying, yeah, but, when it comes to services, the United States has a surplus because of big tech vis-a-vis Europe. Yeah, but you can't use that against them because, if there are no Mercedes-Benzes traveling across the Atlantic because of a trade war between the United States and the European Union, so what? Americans can live without Mercedes-Benzes, right? They will have to buy Cadillacs. They will have to buy, Nissans, whatever, right? It's not the end of the world for the United States. But if there is a war when it comes to tech, to big tech, and let's say Google cuts off all of Europe from YouTube, I don't think we can survive that. At least our governments cannot survive that. Politically, it will be devastating. So you're absolutely right. The fact that we have no cloud capital of our own in Europe has rendered us irrelevant. It's part of the irrelevance of Europe. And the reason why we don't have cloud capital, well, there are things you can do at many different levels. One of the simplest things that we could push for is to introduce legislation that enforces interoperability. So, for instance, remember back 20 years ago, when was it? When the first mobile phones came out, you got an account, a telephone number from a company. If you wanted to change company, you had to change your telephone number. And that was a switching cost, massive switching cost. And so Parliament legislated that you have the right to carry your number with you. That's interoperability at a very simple level of mobile phones. Now, I mentioned before that, when I went from Twitter to Blue Sky, I couldn't make that transition. Now I'm on both. I can't leave Twitter because I've got 1.2 million followers. Imagine, however, if interoperability was legislated. And that meant that when I post something on Blue Sky, then X, Twitter, has an obligation to convey that post to my 1.2 million followers in Twitter. I wouldn't have to stay in Twitter. That would really reduce the exorbitant power of big tech. Now, interestingly, that interoperability has been legislated in China about a year ago, right? So you can do it. It is absolutely doable. Of course, big tech is going to kick and scream if you do that. So that's something you can do, which makes perfect sense. It has been done before with the telephone numbers of telecoms, of mobile telephony. And it's only the exorbitant power, political power of big tech that prevents us from having this conversation as to why are we not reducing interoperability. Then you can move on to other measures, gradually coming to what I was saying before, our cities taking over many of the digital thieves, the cloud thieves that now belong to Uber and Airbnb. And if you really want to go beyond municipal politics and this kind of digital social democracy, which I'm proposing, and you want to move towards a socialist alternative, which is dear to my heart as a unreconstructed Marxist. I have to warn our audience about that. Then we were talking about the social ownership of all platforms on the basis of one person, one employee, one share, one vote. Not state-owned, but one person, one share, one vote. And if you want to move to payment systems, I'm all in favor of a central bank digital currency, which sets aside the monopoly of the bankers over the payment system. Imagine if, we could, if in Norway, your central bank allowed each one of you, every citizen, to have a digital account with the central bank. And the money that you have there collects the overnight interest rate of the central bank. And you can make free payments. And then you can move to full reserve banking and set aside this awful financial system that we have. So there are many, you can start small and simple with interoperability and go all the way up to a socialist alternative manner in which to own and to manage cloud capital. Glenn, I don't want us to end on a pessimistic note, so allow me
yes, please.
to answer your point. Yes, it is really very easy to lose hope when you look at these pictures, but there are different ways of reading or interpreting those images. When you looked at this photograph of the coronation of Donald Trump 2.0 with the tech lords around him, you know what? I saw something different to Donald and his tech mates. I saw a Roman triumph, a Roman emperor who gathered these guys around him to humiliate them because he hates them. Each and every one of them. So you remember that, Facebook had banned him. Twitter had banned him. He was not on Instagram. He had to create Truth Social of his own. So it was when I say a Roman triumph, in the same way that Roman emperors would walk into Rome or ride into Rome with the local lords that they had apprehended and humiliated in front of the Romans. This is what I think he was doing there. And you saw the way in which he completely jettisoned Elon Musk. And he will do this with Jeff Bezos, with all. That's why they are really so very worried and they are trying to placate themselves. And, when you have so much concentrated power, like the power in that room, in the White House, wherever it was, this concentrated power, undermines itself. That system, this techno-feudal system, like the capitalist system before, only a lot more because techno-feudal power is much greater, is unstable. Like a cartel is unstable. So the hope that I get from looking at their exorbitant power is that exorbitant power is not sustainable. It will crumble. So what Democrats, true Democrats, I consider myself to be a Democrat, in the old ancient Greek sense of wanting the demos to rule. We should take heart from the fact that their power may be supreme, but it is fleeting and it will crumble, even if we don't do anything. Even if we all, say, yes, Donald, yes, Jeff Bezos, yes, Elon Musk, it will crumble because the system has the seeds of its own destruction buried in its roots. Our job is to get ready, so that when it starts flaking and collapsing, that we have alternatives. Because in 2008, the financialized capitalism crumbled and nearly self-destructed, but we were not ready. Let's get ready.